When you hear the word fishing, you might imagine someone casting a line into the water, waiting for a bite. Narcissists use the same tactic, but instead of catching fish, they're trying to hook you. They throw out bait, a message, a compliment, an apology, even a promise of change. And just like a fish drawn to the lure, many people take the bait without realizing the danger that lies beneath. Why does this happen? Because the bait is designed to play on your deepest emotional needs. It might be your hope that they finally changed, your guilt for walking away, or your longing for the good moments that once existed. Narcissists are master fishermen. They know exactly which bait will catch you. But here's the truth. The hook is always hidden. Behind the apology may lie another cycle of manipulation. Behind the compliment may be another round of criticism. And behind the promise of change is usually more of the same behavior that hurt you before. So how do you protect yourself? First, by recognizing the bait when it's thrown. If a person who has repeatedly disrespected you suddenly offers kindness, ask yourself, is this genuine? Or am I being pulled back into a cycle? Second, set boundaries like a strong net around yourself. Boundaries aren't walls to shut the world out. They are shields to protect your peace. Saying no to manipulation is saying yes to your self-respect. And finally, remember this. You don't need to prove your worth by responding to their bait. You don't need to defend yourself, explain yourself, or give them another chance to harm you. Sometimes the most powerful response is silence, because silence refuses to play the game. Don't let yourself be caught in their fishing scam. The bait may look tempting, but freedom lies in swimming past it, choosing clarity, dignity, and peace over chaos. The moment you stop biting, the game ends. When we talk about the phishing scam, we're describing one of the most common yet subtle tactics used by narcissistic individuals to pull people back under their influence. Imagine a fisherman standing at the edge of a lake. He doesn't throw in a hook just once. He casts again and again, sometimes changing the bait until he finds the one that works. Narcissists operate in a very similar way. They know that people are more likely to respond when the bait feels familiar, comforting, or emotionally triggering. And because they have studied you, your weaknesses, your hopes, your fears, they know exactly what kind of bait to use. This bait can take many forms. It could be a sudden message, after months of silence, something as simple as, "Hey, I was just thinking about you." It could be an apology that seems heartfelt, like, "I know I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself." Sometimes it's disguised as nostalgia. "Remember that amazing trip we took? No one has ever understood me like you did." In other cases, it could be disguised as crisis. I'm going through a really tough time, and you're the only one I can talk to." Each of these is a different type of bait. Some play on your compassion, some on your sense of loyalty, some on your desire to feel special, and some on your hope that this time things might finally be different. But what makes it a scam is that the intention behind it is not pure. Just as the fisherman has no intention of letting the fish go free, the narcissist has no intention of truly changing, respecting you, or nurturing a healthy relationship. The bait is simply a means to get you hooked again, to reel you back into a cycle of control, manipulation, and emotional depletion. The pattern is always the same. They throw out the line, you respond, and soon you're tangled back in their net of promises, confusion, and hurt. It's important to understand that narcissistic fishing works so well because it doesn't come at you in an obvious way. If someone were to openly insult you or mistreat you from the start, it would be easier to reject them. But fishing is subtle. It often starts with sweetness, care, or vulnerability, the exact opposite of what you've come to expect from them. This sudden shift disarms you. You start to wonder, maybe they've really changed this time. That hope is the very hook they rely on. Think of how a scam works in the financial world. A scammer might promise you wealth, opportunity, or safety, but the real goal is to take something valuable from you. Emotional phishing scams work the same way. They offer connection, apology, or affection, but the real goal is to regain control over your attention and your emotions. The moment you engage, they've already succeeded. Even if you argue, even if you're angry, you're still giving them what they want, your energy. Another element of the phishing scam is timing. Narcissists often reach out when they sense you are vulnerable. Maybe you're lonely. Maybe you're struggling with a life change. Maybe you finally started moving on. They have an uncanny ability to sense when the hook will be most effective. That's why the bait often feels irresistible. It arrives right when you're most likely to bite. But make no mistake, this isn't coincidence. It's calculated. Understanding this process is your first line of defense. Once you see the phishing scam for what it is, you begin to recognize the patterns. That random message that once felt like fate suddenly looks like strategy. That apology that once tugged at your heartstrings now sounds like a recycled line. That sudden kindness no longer feels like a miracle, but rather like the opening move in a very familiar game. And here is the truth that can protect you, no matter how many times you take the bait. The outcome will always be the same. The fisherman doesn't suddenly decide to respect the fish and let it swim freely. The narcissist doesn't suddenly wake up one day ready to honor boundaries and love unconditionally. The scam doesn't turn into sincerity just because you want it to. The only way to win is not to play. The only way to protect yourself is to stop biting, no matter how tempting the bait might look. When you fully understand the phishing scam, you realize that the bait is not love, it's not change, and it's not connection. It is simply manipulation disguised as something meaningful. And when you see it clearly, you gain the power to swim past it and preserve your peace. One of the reasons people keep falling for the narcissist's phishing scam is not because they are weak, foolish, or unaware, but because of the powerful psychological traps that are built into the cycle. These traps are not accidents. They are deeply embedded into the way narcissists relate to others. And once you understand them, you can start to see why so many intelligent, capable, and strong people still find themselves hooked again and again. The first, and perhaps most powerful trap, is hope. Hope is a beautiful human quality, but in the hands of a manipulative person, it becomes a weapon. You remember the moments when this person was kind, charming, and affectionate. You think about the version of them that made you feel special, the version that promised connection and belonging. When they send out bait, whether it's an apology, a compliment, or a reminder of the past, that hope resurfaces. You think, maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time they really mean it. That hope becomes the hook, and you bite, because you don't want to give up on what you once thought was possible. The second trap is guilt. Narcissists are skilled at twisting narratives so that you feel responsible for their behavior or their suffering. If you walk away, they might tell you that you've abandoned them. If you set boundaries, they may accuse you of being selfish or unkind. Even if you've endured years of disrespect, you may still find yourself questioning, am I being too harsh? Am I overreacting? This guilt is deeply disorienting because it makes you forget that you are allowed to protect your peace. And once guilt has been triggered, it's very easy to fall back into their orbit, thinking that giving them another chance is the compassionate or fair thing to do. Another psychological trap is nostalgia. Our minds have a way of holding on to highlights, even when the overall story is painful. You might remember the laughter, the trips, the passionate moments, and the words of affection. These memories act like emotional anchors. When the narcissist dangles bait, nostalgia pulls you backward, making you crave the good times while minimizing the bad ones. It creates a kind of selective memory where the sharp edges of the past are blurred and only the soft images remain. Narcissists know this, which is why they so often remind you of shared moments. They are counting on nostalgia to cloud your judgment. Then there is the trap of unfinished business. Humans crave closure. When a relationship ends in chaos, confusion, or betrayal, it leaves behind unanswered questions. Why did they treat me that way? Did they ever love me? Was it my fault? These questions become an itch that's hard to ignore. And when the narcissist reappears with bait, perhaps in the form of an explanation, an apology, or a sudden willingness to talk, it feels like an opportunity to finally get answers. But the truth is, closure rarely comes from the very person who caused the wound. Instead, the promise of closure is just another lure designed to pull you back in. The psychological traps don't stop there. There is also the trap of trauma bonding. When someone alternates between cruelty and kindness, your nervous system gets caught in a cycle of craving their approval. Every insult is followed by a crumb of affection, every rejection by a moment of tenderness. Over time, this creates a powerful attachment that feels almost addictive. You're no longer just responding to love. You're responding to the withdrawal of love. When the narcissist throws out bait, it feels like relief from that withdrawal, which makes it incredibly hard to resist. Finally, there's the trap of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of never being understood the way you thought they understood you. Narcissists exploit these fears by suggesting that no one else will love you, that you're too difficult, or that you'll regret walking away. When you're vulnerable, these fears can feel real enough to drag you back into the cycle, even when you know deep down that the relationship is toxic. When you look closely at these traps, hope, guilt, nostalgia, unfinished business, trauma bonding, and fear, you begin to see how powerful they are. They're not about logic, they're about emotion. And that's why simply telling yourself, "I should know better," is rarely enough to break free. Awareness is the first step, but compassion for yourself is just as important. You fell into these traps because you are human, because you long for connection, because you care, and because you trusted. Those are not flaws, they are qualities. But in the hands of a manipulative person, those qualities are exploited. Once you can recognize these traps, you can begin to dismantle them. You can remind yourself that hope without evidence is just fantasy. That guilt is often manufactured. That nostalgia is selective. That closure is something you can give yourself. That trauma bonding is a chemical reaction, not proof of love. And that fear of being alone is far less dangerous than the pain of staying trapped. Understanding these psychological traps doesn't just help you avoid the narcissist's phishing scam. It helps you reclaim your clarity, your strength, and your freedom. And the moment you see the trap clearly, it loses its power over you. If you want to avoid falling into the narcissist's phishing scam, one of the most important tools you can develop is the ability to recognize the red flags. These warning signs often appear subtle at first, but when you begin to name them and connect the dots, the pattern becomes clear. Red flags are not meant to scare you, they are meant to guide you, like markers on a path, reminding you where danger lies. The more you learn to trust those signals, the harder it becomes for someone to pull you back into the same cycle of manipulation. One of the most common red flags is sudden sweetness or excessive kindness after a period of neglect, abuse, or distance. This is not ordinary kindness. It's strategic. They may shower you with compliments, act unusually attentive, or even behave as though they've had an epiphany about how much you mean to them. The shift is so dramatic that it feels convincing, even moving. But genuine change doesn't come overnight, and it doesn't show up only when they fear losing control. This sudden turn of behavior is a sign that they're baiting you with what you've longed to hear, not a reflection of real growth. Another red flag is what is often called future faking. This happens when the narcissist promises a brighter, more stable, more loving future, but with no evidence of follow-through. They might say things like, "I want us to travel more, to start fresh, to be better than ever. Or, I can't wait to build a real future with you. In the moment, these promises feel like validation, like the future you always hoped for is finally within reach. But if you look back, you may notice a pattern of promises that never materialize. Future faking is a lure, not a plan, and the lack of consistent action is the red flag waving right in front of you. Another clear warning sign is guilt tripping. If every time you try to set a boundary, you're met with statements like, "After all I've done for you, this is how you treat me," or "You're just like everyone else who abandons me," then what you're seeing is manipulation in disguise. Healthy relationships respect boundaries. Unhealthy ones punish you for having them. When guilt becomes the currency of connection, you can be sure you're not dealing with love, but with control. Fake remorse is another bait that often confuses people. A narcissist may say, "I know I hurt you, and I'll never do it again." Or, "I've changed, I'm different now." On the surface, it looks like accountability, but the red flag lies in the lack of consistency. Real remorse is followed by lasting change, not by temporary words designed to pull you back in. If the cycle repeats, hurt, apology, then the apology is nothing more than bait, and the remorse is a mask. You may also notice love bombing as a red flag. This is when they overwhelm you with affection, attention, or gifts. Often at the exact moment you start to distance yourself. It feels intoxicating because it taps into your need to feel valued, but it's rarely sustainable. The intensity fades once they feel secure that you've been reeled back in, and the cycle of neglect or criticism resumes. Recognizing love bombing as a tactic rather than a genuine expression of care is essential in breaking free from the scam. Another red flag to pay attention to is their reaction when you don't take the bait. If you respond to their phishing attempt with silence, distance, or firm boundaries, do they respect it? Or do they escalate with anger, accusations, or even a sudden crisis? Narcissists often amplify their tactics when the bait doesn't work. They may suddenly claim they're unwell, in danger, or desperately in need of you. This sudden urgency is not coincidence. It's pressure designed to override your instincts and force you back into compliance. The red flag here is that your refusal to engage isn't met with respect, but with resistance and drama. One final red flag to watch for is inconsistency. A person who is genuinely healthy and safe to be with will act in ways that align with their words. But with a narcissist, the story often changes. One day they present themselves as the victim, the next as your savior, the next as someone who never did anything wrong at all. This shifting narrative is confusing, and confusion is itself a red flag. Healthy relationships bring clarity. Toxic ones thrive on keeping you unsteady. Recognizing these red flags requires courage because it means you have to accept that the behavior you're seeing is not an accident, but a pattern. And when you see the pattern, you can no longer cling to denial. You have to face the reality that the phishing scam is not a one-time slip, but a deliberate tactic that will repeat itself as long as you allow it. The gift of these red flags is that they give you a chance to choose differently. They are signals, warnings, and invitations to protect yourself. Every time you spot one, you have the opportunity to pause, to reflect, and to ask, is this bait or is this real? And when you can consistently answer that question with honesty, you free yourself from the cycle. Because the truth is, once you learn to see the red flags clearly, you stop mistaking the bait for love. Breaking free from the narcissist's phishing scam doesn't start with confrontation. And it doesn't start with trying to change them. It starts with awareness. Awareness is the light that reveals the hook hidden behind the bait. Once you can see clearly, you no longer have to swim in circles, getting caught in the same trap again and again. You begin to understand that freedom is not something the narcissist will give you. It is something you choose for yourself. Awareness begins with naming what is happening. When that unexpected message pops up, when the sudden apology arrives, when the promises or guilt trips appear out of nowhere, awareness allows you to pause instead of react. You can step back and say to yourself, this is bait. This is the cycle I've seen before. That pause is powerful because the phishing scam relies on you responding impulsively, emotionally, without time to think. Each moment of pause is a small act of reclaiming your control. Breaking free also requires boundaries. Boundaries are not punishments, they are protections. They are the lines you draw to keep yourself safe. When you decide, I will not answer messages after I've said no, or I will not engage in conversations that leave me drained, you are building a shield around your peace of mind. At first, boundaries may feel uncomfortable, even harsh, especially if you've been conditioned to prioritize other people's feelings over your own. But over time, boundaries become a declaration of self-respect. They remind you that your well-being matters, that you have the right to choose who gets access to your energy. Another key part of breaking free is accepting that closure may never come from them. One of the strongest hooks the narcissist dangles is the illusion of resolution. That if you just hear them out one more time, if you just meet with them, if you just explain yourself, you'll finally get the peace you crave. But true closure doesn't come from the person who broke your trust. It comes from you deciding that you don't need their explanation to heal. Closure is not something you wait for. It's something you give yourself by saying, I deserve peace even without their apology. Awareness also means recognizing the cost of staying hooked. Every time you bite the bait, you lose a little more energy, clarity, and confidence. You find yourself exhausted, questioning your worth, doubting your instincts. When you add up those costs, you begin to see that the price of engaging is far too high. And once you truly understand the cost, choosing not to engage stops feeling like loss. It starts feeling like liberation. Breaking free also requires reframing silence. Many people fear that ignoring the narcissists, bait makes them cold, unkind, or unforgiving. But silence is not cruelty. Silence is a boundary. Silence is refusing to feed a cycle that thrives on your energy. Sometimes silence is the most compassionate act you can take for yourself because it stops you from being pulled back into chaos. And in that silence, you create space for your healing, your growth, and your future. Awareness also allows you to see the pattern, not just in them, but in yourself. You begin to ask, why do I keep responding? What part of me wants to believe this bait? What wound in me is being touched every time they reach out? This kind of self-reflection is not about blame. It's about understanding. When you understand your own vulnerabilities, whether it's loneliness, guilt, fear, or hope, you can begin to nurture those wounds in healthier ways. Instead of letting a narcissist exploit them, you learn to care for them yourself. That self-awareness becomes armor, protecting you from future traps. The final step in breaking free is redirecting your focus. The narcissist's phishing scam thrives when your energy revolves around them. Every response, every argument, every emotional reaction feeds the cycle. But when you turn your energy inward, toward your healing, your goals, your relationships with people who truly care, you starve the scam of the very fuel it needs. The less you respond, the weaker their hold becomes. The more you invest in your own growth, the less tempting the bait looks. Breaking free is not a single moment, it's a process. There may be times you slip, times you take the bait again, times you doubt yourself. That doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. What matters is that you keep coming back to awareness, that you keep choosing clarity over confusion, that you keep reminding yourself of the truth. You don't have to play their game. You don't have to prove your worth to someone who only values control. You don't have to keep biting at the same hook, hoping for a different outcome. Freedom comes when you recognize the scam for what it is and refuse to participate. Freedom comes when you trust yourself enough to walk away, even without answers, even without closure, even without their approval. And that freedom begins with awareness. Awareness that the bait is not love, that the cycle is not change, and that your worth has never been defined by how well you can endure manipulation. The moment you see clearly, the phishing scam loses its power. And the moment you stop biting, you begin to swim in waters of your own choosing, waters filled with peace, dignity, and self-respect.